So my great pleasure to introduce Allan Dafoe. So Allan is an assistant professor of political science at Yale University and also a research associate at the Future of Humanities Institute at the University of Oxford. His research seeks to understand the causes of world peace and stability. Specifically, he has studied the causes of the liberal peace, the role of reputation and honor as motives for war, and the logic of provocation in crisis escalation. He has developed methodological tools and approaches to enable more transparent, credible causal inference, for which he was recognized as an emerging researcher with the Lima Rosenthal Prize for Open Social Science. This work is published in the American Journal of Political Science, World Politics, Journal of Politics and Science, amongst other journals. His current research focuses on AI grand strategy, which requires clearly perceiving the strategic landscape emerging from transformative artificial intelligence and helping humanity navigate safely through it. He's working with the Future of Humanities Institute to build their AI politics and policy group. So please join me in welcoming Allan.
Hi. Great. We have a lot to cover, so I will begin and proceed quickly. So we can think of artificial intelligence as simply machines that are capable of sophisticated information processing, or more informally, machines that perform tasks that previously required humans to do them. That's an imperfect definition, but it's suggestive. We can break AI up into three components productively. There's these sensors and input that provide some kind of data to the algorithm. There's the algorithm itself, depicted here as actually, it would be a deep neural network, which is sort of the most common type of machine learning algorithm at the frontier of AI today. And then you have some outputs. When we talk about AI, we most often think about the algorithm as being the component that most matters. But it's important to remember that the sensors, the input, and the output are also crucial components of machine intelligence, because that is what enables them to be so influential. So in the past years, AI has become a hot topic, as I'm sure you're aware. We might ask why this is the case. Well, one structural factor contributing to it is just this generalized Moore's law. So we're seeing continuing progress in a range of computational characteristics, in particular exponential improvements, and this is driving a lot of the progress, but not only this. There's now, more recently, an influx of investment dollars. AI researchers are also growing exponentially, it seems. This is attendance at the leading AI conference, NIPS. I don't have a figure for salaries, but it also would look explosive like this. Startups are pouring into the various industries, trying to deploy AI to transform different sectors. And I would offer this sort of AI 2017 conjecture, which is that if we were able to freeze technological progress, so we just have the algorithms we have today, and we have the hardware that we have today, and we just built more hardware, collected more data, and deployed it, and revised our systems, I think AI of 2017 would transform almost every industry that we can think of, in every area of society and politics. So we could, at length, go through each of these. Most of the applications, or the potential, seems to be positive. AI seems to be a boon to humanity. There's a lot of promise. However, there are also risks and challenges, and I will focus on those. Not because I think most of the probability mass, necessarily, is on the risks, but because there are prudential reasons for focusing on them. One of which is that the opportunities, the upsides, tend to coincide with the profit motive. So we can sort of leave to capitalism to identify those opportunities and deploy them. Whereas the risks often involve externalities, intergenerational, global externalities, and sometimes have a time window that might be closing. And so for that reason, those of us thinking about AI governance tend to direct a lot of attention to thinking about what could go wrong and what do we need to get right soon to best harness the bounty of AI. This just shows a distribution, sort of a credence distribution of AI experts about human-level AI and what it would do for humanity. You see most of the mass is on things going well, on balance good or extremely good, but there's still some mass that it could go badly, 5% extremely bad on the order of human extinction. So we want to get that probability down as low as we can. Okay, in the near term, there's a range of governance challenges. In the interest of covering a lot of content, I'm just going to collapse them into two categories. The first I will think of as we want to think about the encoding or the failure to encode human values, political values, in our systems as we deploy algorithms. So as we start hiring people using algorithms, or giving out fellowships or loans, or making policing decisions and deployments, or judicial decisions, or even just have our social networks shaped by algorithms. All of this influences the extent to which our values are represented in the world around us. And we need to be conscious of that and look for opportunities to govern our algorithms and incentivize them and direct them so as to sort of maximize the values that we would like to see in the world around us. So some considerations are fairness, accountability, transparency, efficiency, and more broadly, we might think of ethics. There's another big cluster of near-term governance issues that I will call safety and critical systems. So this is the systems in which people could die, lots of people could die, or the economy could suffer extreme harm. We want the deployment of algorithms in those systems to be robust, transparent, secure, and for there to be appropriate oversight. Okay, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this space. It is increasingly being funded, and work is being done on this. I'm now going to move to some more systemic, global, and extreme risks, in part because those are especially neglected, and EAs are the kinds of people most likely to address those governance challenges. So here are 4 extreme systemic risks that I believe are plausible given the 2017 AI conjecture. So even if we froze technological progress today, I think each of these 4 risks are serious and need to be addressed. Very briefly, labor seems to be likely to be increasingly displaced. We might need to reform our training systems, our education systems, even how we think about work. It could be that mass unemployment will be a phenomenon of the future, and we need to reform our welfare system and our notion of self-worth to accommodate that. Inequality seems like a candidate for dramatic expansion, which poses lots of challenges. So there's lots of work that should be done on this. Some EAs are already thinking about this. You don't need to think, or you don't need to be a specialist on AI to work on inequality, unemployment, though it helps to pay attention to what's happening in AI and associated domains. Okay, 2, I'm going to go terribly brief here, but I'm happy to discuss these issues later. It's plausibly the case that AI industries and services are natural global oligopolies or monopolies. And what that means is if you secure a leading company in some service, say search, say social network provision, say e-commerce, it may be very difficult for a challenger to enter, right? And there's reasons related to the digitization of these markets, so the marginal cost is low, to network effects, say in social networks, and to other sort of economic factors. But I think it's plausible across all of them that AI may be unlike other kinds of services and trade, in that you have now potentially incentives for what's called strategic trade, strategic industry, industrial policy, and that could change the whole international political economic game. The world could become much more about a sort of an economic nationalism, mercantilism, and these are extreme challenges for global order. 3, AI and associated technologies, sensors, robotics, may enable authorities with capital to have much more capable surveillance, ability to profile individuals, identify potential political allies or dissidents, to persuade people at scale, but tailored to their individual psychology or vulnerabilities, and then finally deploy robotic systems to use physical force to maintain order. This could radically change the relationship between people and governments, and I think is something we really need to be watching and thinking about how that trajectory, what that could do and how we can make sure it goes well, or do our best to do that. And 4, there's this phenomenon called strategic stability, which is the idea that what's the probability of 2 nuclear powers falling into an inadvertent nuclear war. So during the Cold War, there were a few moments, the Cuban Missile Crisis being one, where it seemed like it is possible to fall into a nuclear war for a variety of sort of strategic reasons, which I don't have time to discuss. And it's plausibly the case that a set of technological trends will reduce strategic stability. So it may be that what's called secure second strike will not be so secure. Submarine ballistic missiles and mobile ballistic missiles, which are the two most resilient arms of the nuclear triad today, could become vulnerable because of subsea sensor networks, satellite imagery, inferences you can do based on social network patterns and other data, all of which AI will help extract from that data into usable information. Couple that with hypersonic missiles, which shorten the retaliation time from about 24 minutes to 6 minutes, and the incentive thereby to automate your nuclear retaliation. And you can imagine scenarios where a conventional kinetic conflict, say in the South China Sea over freedom of navigation patrols, could escalate machine timescales to nuclear war. This is something that serious IR scholars and security experts are beginning to think about, and is also something that we might be able to contribute to. Now again, all of this, I think, goes through just with AI as it is today, just with some more sensors, some more computing systems, but not radically new technological capabilities. However, we can't, it seems unlikely that AI is going to stay where it is today. On the other hand, it's plausible that we will start seeing human level or superhuman level machine intelligence in various strategic domains, and we need to think about what that could mean. Now, sometimes when people hear this notion of human level AI, they think that the speaker or the thinkers behind this have a naive notion of machine intelligence. They're anthropomorphizing machine intelligence, right? They're saying, well, humans have this distribution of capabilities, and so they're thinking, well, machines are like that times 10. That is not so. The reason we talk about human level so often is because it is a strategically relevant threshold for narrow machine intelligence or general machine intelligence. It is relevant for a few reasons. One is what I call the substitution threshold. When machines are better in a cost-effective sense than humans at some task, then you will start seeing the substitution of machines for humans in those domains. That has obvious implications for labor, unemployment, but also implications for control, if you're taking humans out of the loop, as it were, for power, relationships between authority and capital and citizens, also for political backlash. As people become displaced from various roles that they're used to, they might mobilize to oppose that. So it's a politically relevant threshold. Another relevant threshold is what I call the performance threshold. This is when machines are better than the best humans at some task domain. So machines are on track to become better air combat pilots than humans. And when that happens, in an industry like defense that is very quality sensitive, right? They're willing to spend that extra dollar to get the best combat pilot, then you're likely to see deployment of those systems, and it could change the whole game, right? It's hard to know what it would mean if we have superhuman math machine intelligence or superhuman engineering machine intelligence. So for the rest of the talk, I'm going to focus on these potentially really transformative levels of machine intelligence. And this is all within what we call the technical landscape in terms of the broader research landscape. Okay. One point I want you to take away is that the development of transformative machine intelligence is, again, not likely to be even or distributed in the way human intelligence is distributed. So this shows DeepMind's DQN algorithm playing a range of Atari games. And you see that for some it's superhuman, and for some it's grossly subhuman. And I think this is a plausible metaphor for what it will be like when really transformative human-level AI starts coming online. It will be radically superhuman in some domains, while still being plausibly subhuman in other domains. And which domains become superhuman first could really change the strategic landscape. A related point is that by the time machines are better than humans at every strategically relevant domain, it's not like the machine just got better than the best human. At that point, it just got better than the best human at its worst strategic task, and it is probably vastly superhuman, or the systems that it's part of are vastly superhuman at other tasks. So we might ask, what are the narrow transformative capabilities where we could see superhuman AI coming online soonest? We don't know, but here are some heuristics for thinking about it. Domains where there's a lot of data, especially domains where you can simulate the environment. So this is why I mentioned math. If you think about AlphaGo and AlphaGo 0, the reason why it was possible to make such rapid progress is because the universe of Go can be perfectly simulated. So you can really leverage reinforcement learning to generate competent AI systems. 3, if the domain is narrow in the sense that it doesn't touch on the whole world, it doesn't require a whole world model, or these other sort of notions of common sense that seem to be sort of a key mountain to what's called artificial general intelligence. And 4, domains with high stakes, right? If there's a lot of money or power at stake, you can expect a lot of effort to be spent trying to get really transformative or powerful AI systems in those domains. So here's some conjectures where we might see these narrow transformative superhuman capabilities coming online first. However, it may be the case that we don't just get a set of narrow systems, but we do get really AGI, artificial general intelligence, that's capable of what we don't really know what it is, but common sense, general intelligence. And so a question we want to ask is, what's holding us back from that? Here are a set of mountains in Demis's words. These are sort of challenges facing cutting-edge AI that seem like they're necessary to have AI that's capable of doing the things that humans do. And there may be more mountains. Or it may be that many of these are actually share some common factor, some common capability, and once that's achieved, then they'll all start falling in rapid succession. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Very briefly, here's a survey of AI experts that I collaborators conducted. This is not meant to be strong evidence of when human-level AI is going to arrive. This is, the question was, when machines will be better than humans at every task. Rather, it's one piece of evidence, which is the best we have so far. The main thing I would want you to take away from this figure is that AI experts, if you look at the red curve, which represents the average, do not rule out that we could have really transformative, human-level, across-the-board AI in 10 or 25 years. So that's 10% or 30% probability, according to this. OK, I want to show you a little allegory of how progress in AI might go faster than we expect if we're just naively extrapolating. So here's a figure, or half of a figure, from EFF Metrics, which is a really nice web page. And it shows performance on one of the Atari games called Frostbite. And if we were in mid-2015, and suppose Frostbite was a strategically relevant domain, and we asked, by when will machines be superhuman, or at least machines learning from pixels be superhuman, we would draw some lines out and conclude 2050 to 2100. Of course, I selected this example. That would be grossly mistaken. Something clicked at the end of 2015, and we went from subhuman to superhuman within a year. If you look at all of the EFF metrics performance graphs, some of them look like this, whereas some of them look gradual. And so one important area of research today is to try and make a science out of this, to try and identify when we think we might be surprised by progress and when we can extrapolate from past trends or from other inputs like compute, talent, resources spent. There are a number of reasons why rapid broad takeoff is a plausible hypothesis and that it might happen soon. Let me just talk about the last two very briefly. You've probably heard of at least, especially the third one. The fourth point references the idea that we might already have abundant key inputs for advanced human-level AI just waiting to be untapped, waiting to be properly exploited. So we might already have sufficient compute in the world to really deploy thousands or millions of human-level AI systems. There might be lots of insights just waiting to be uncovered by a machine AI system, sort of a research AI system that can discover them more rapidly than humans, and I can give you an example of that. And we can also think about, say, data overhang, for example, in the form of the internet. Right? The internet has physics textbooks, history textbooks, strategy, lots of conversations between people, all waiting for an organism that can read it all and integrate it into a single world model. Right? We can't do that. We're mortal. We only live for so many decades, and we read pretty slowly, whereas a machine could plausibly read the whole thing once it's able to integrate that information, and that could be really transformative. The last point, with current machine learning systems, it costs a lot more computing power to train the system than it does to execute the system once you've trained it, on the order of 1 million to 100 million times more costly. This means that once you've trained up your first transformative AGI, if you choose to recycle that compute for deploying it, you might have around 10 million instances of that AGI. So it's not the case like it is with organisms, biological organisms giving birth to the next generation, that they come online kind of one at a time. Rather, you might go from 0 to 10 million AGIs overnight. OK. I'm going to move really quickly because I enjoyed talking about those previous slides. So a key question is what the trade-off is between safety and performance. We just don't know, and it really matters. If the trade-off is stark, if it's very costly to build safe, aligned systems, then it makes the governance problem much harder. Whereas if it turns out it's relatively easy, then humanity is in a much better position. So one thing we want to do is think hard about what this trade-off might be, and perhaps some systems, some architectures face a less steep trade-off than others. I'm going to skip some slides. So moving on to Demis and the AI race. So Demis points out, as have others, that we want to worry about racing and sort of impatient hurrying to the finish line when safety gets cut. And in particular, this is a problem once we're thinking about national governments. Well, it is the case today that national governments are really getting involved in the conversation. So Canada, South Korea, Japan, the UK increasingly, especially China, which seems to have a very deliberate plan to be the world leader in AI by 2030, and they seem to be acting on it. There are also conversations in the US, but not yet at the official government level, or rather the conversation hasn't changed the way it has changed in some of these other countries. Some other countries have taken notice of the idea that AI might be something that's powerful. One leader that got attention recently is our neighbor a few countries over, Putin, who said, "Whoever leads in AI will rule the world." He didn't, in fact, look like this when he was saying it. And this is part of a little message I want to communicate, which is that he actually said this in the context of encouraging children or kids in their science projects. So there were kids from around Russia doing science projects about various frontiers of science and engineering, and Putin was encouraging them all and saying everything like, this is the future of Russia, this is really important. He did use especially hyperbolic language for AI, but this was embedded in a long conversation. However, the world noticed Putin's quote. I don't know what the right metric is, but one metric is a Google News search of Putin rule world artificial intelligence gives over 25,000 news hits. And it really many news sites were talking about this. And so this, I just want to point out, is a challenge that we face in doing research in this space. Because while an AI race is something that could be very dangerous and important to think through, it's also very hard to communicate publicly about. Because the media and the public is prone to sort of being drawn to the most extreme messages about it. OK, so let me tell you very briefly about some projects that we're working on and that you might contribute to. But there's really a lot to do. One category we call AI politics. And this refers to the set of questions where we treat agents as not sort of coordinated, but pursuing their notions of self-interest, perhaps in a rivalrous way. So we have work on public opinion, looking at the relationships between government and industry and researchers. We're really engaging, trying to understand China and look for opportunities to cooperate there. A lot of case studies can be done. These are especially nice for a new researcher to take on because you can sort of pull together the literature on a various relevant tech case study. Something I think about a lot are the abstract strategic properties of technology, and specifically what we're likely to get from AI and how that could change the economy, military dynamics, and so forth. And a range of other, one other I'll flag that Helen also mentioned is the deployment problem. You can think of that as the hypothetical, what if there was an AGI breakthrough tomorrow, and you're, say, an advisor to the research lab? or you're an advisor to the government that hears about this. What do you advise? It's a very hard problem to answer, but it's especially motivating, and I think it's useful for that reason. Another category of work that we do, we call AI governance. And this now asks if we're able to have a calm enough conversation across relevant stakeholders, what is it that we want to build? So what are the institutional structures that we want to employ? What's the constitutional foundation? How do we incentivize people to be part of this governance regime? And how do we make sure it achieves the various values that we have in mind? Again, there's case studies to be done. Some really interesting technical work that I'll flag Miles Brundage is working on AI verification agreements. So how can, say, a principal and an agent, you can think of it like the board of directors and the researchers, or two countries that are trying to cooperate, how can they verify that the other side is building the AI system in the way that they agreed that it should be? If you want to be involved in this, who can you talk to and join? There's a number of groups that are thinking about this. The two biggest ones are the Future of Humanity Institute and the Open Philanthropy Project, though these other groups are also thinking about transformative AI and have some work thinking about strategy and governance. In particular, the Future of Humanity Institute has a not yet announced, or we'll call this the announcement, Governance of AI program. So here is depicted those of us who were there on picture day, and here are some others working with us. And we're really trying to scale up as quickly as we can to integrate all the talent in this community to work on these problems. We're working on the career pipeline. It's a challenge. And so if we're not able yet to sort of get you into the sort of career trajectory, please just keep thinking about this, reading about this, writing your thoughts down, and building a community and joining the community. And last, if you have any questions or want to really try to enter, I think, this community, but especially the Governance of AI program at FHI, you should talk to that guy, Carrick Flynn, who is a core pillar in the program. Or email this email. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alan. Loads of questions come through on that.
Great.
So on the sort of back end of your talk, so what's your view on the probability and consequences of a potential technological arms race in the space?
The probability and consequences. Technological arms race. So I think I'm going to, I'll say we don't yet know what the proper way to discuss this is. Mm-hmm. And so I will say it's, instead of answering the question, I will say it's something that we need to think about very seriously. It's sufficiently probable and sufficiently consequential that it deserves a lot of our attention.
Okay. So the lack of diversity in AI research poses the threat of building our own biases into AI, a concern that's been shown by certain face recognition studies. What can and should we do to increase diversity in this field to avoid this?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I mean, I think we should look throughout the career pipeline to see where their bottlenecks are and try to address it. I guess the way I think about addressing it is being self-conscious about possible obstacles, maybe reflecting on your network. So to the extent that you're recruiting or identifying people from a network that is correlated with certain characteristics, you try to work against that. I think, fellowship programs and just encouraging anyone interested in this space to think about it and engage in it.
Mm-hmm. So this is actually the same questions we had in the last talk, but they've apologised and say it's still highly relevant. So what single effort would you recommend to a UK Member of Parliament to undertake right now to affect change on this issue?
Yes, so I was actually at Parliament the other day. Let's see, I'll just show you a slide that's relevant. There we go. So the Lord Select Committee is thinking about this, and there's been some reports. Wendy Hall and Pincenti, I believe, wrote a report on sort of building the AI for UK industry. There's sort of the mainstream recommendation, which is, I would say, follow Canada's lead. Canada's doing a good job of adopting a sensible sort of industrial policy with respect to AI. So if you think about AI as like electricity or in the Industrial Revolution, it means that we're going to have to change our whole infrastructure to really harness the benefits. So this is like a mainstream near-term answer to that question, and is where most of the governance attention is likely to go. However, I would also say, thinking about the longer term, we want to start building institutions today so that they're compatible and ideally seed cooperative possibilities in the future. And so to the UK Parliament and others, I would say, start sort of committing to the common good or common good principle or something like that. So that means trying really hard to cooperate with other countries in harnessing the benefits of AI and making sure AI is being deployed for the common good. So there's lots of applications for the environment, for poverty alleviation, for addressing other inequalities and social concerns. That would be sort of a good near-term direction for AI. And then start thinking about these broader problems of our values, safe systems, and how we can reach agreement about how we should be building AI, and then potentially developing a sort of common institution for governing AI in regions like Europe or even the world.
And so you think we're pretty early on in that kind of stage of development, or and you're saying Canada's sort of best practice at the minute?
Canada's best practice for, at least for UK as a model, for industrial policy, sort of promoting an AI researcher community. I haven't seen much commitment to the common good. Not that they haven't, but that wasn't a prominent feature of their strategic plan. We are in early days for institution building, and global institutions take a long time to build. Though if you have a deadline, sometimes it happens quickly. The UN was put together in pretty short notice, but you need something to motivate you. So I do think we should be thinking very hard about this today, thinking about what are the institutions we want to build, and how can we seed those institutions, and maybe waiting for the opportunity when the world realizes that they need to build those institutions so that we can give them the blueprint.
Okay, great. Fantastic, so much. Can you join me in thanking Allan for his time today?
Thank you.